The writing team.
Oh, okay, it's on after set. That's never
Okay,
204.
they're saying, please start now. All right, you're ready, doors closed? Welcome to the celebration, first day of celebration of the 25th anniversary of the making of this show, X-Men the Animated Series. We started February 17th, 1992, and we're starting off a year or two of celebrating the making of the show with a bunch of people that worked and made it happen for you guys that enjoyed it. And today we have the producer-director of the series, Larry Houston, and 4 writers from the series on either side of me, Julia Lewald, Dave McDermott, Steve Melching, and Uhley. Between the 4 of them, they did 14 episodes. So you guys, if you guys got questions about the series, these are good people to ask. And I'm Eric. I was in charge of the writing of the show, so I remember a few things also. We thought we'd start off with just something fun that friends of ours at Screen Junkies put together about 6 months ago when the Apocalypse movie was coming out. They went back and looked over our show and did about a 3.5-minute bit for their for ScreenJunkies.com, which is a wonderful website, by the way. If you guys want to enjoy it, just they went through and spent the time and energy to cut something fun together. So if you're ready for it, we can start with their honest trailers about X-Men the Animated Series.
Before you witness the X-Pocalypse, experience the definitive version of the X-Men, as long as you grew up in the 90s.
Look what she did to the VCR just by touching it!
X-Men, the animated series. Return to the era of super soakers and pizza bagels.
Pizza!
In a decade where no one gave a crap about the Avengers, with the first comic adaptation to combine quips and bright colors with depth and high stakes, all wrapped up in a theme song that's been stuck in your head for decades. I mean, seriously, if Professor X was real, all I'd hear is ba-da-na-na-na-na. With an X-Men team you're pretty damn familiar with by now, who are all pretty much the same as their movie counterparts, except the spandex is yellower, the robes are sexier, and Jubilee is a main character for some reason. Because what the X-Men really need is a Mallrat with the power of sparkles.
I have apprehended the leader of the Mutant Rebellion.
Stop trying to make Jubilee happen, show. It's not gonna happen. Return to the mid-90s on Fox, where in between reruns of Eat the Cat and Power Rangers, you'd watch the X-Men bring classic storylines to life.
Mission accomplished, buddy. Okay.
Like the Phoenix Saga that was so much better than X3, Days of Future Past that's as good as Days of Future Past, and a Weapon X episode that's so much better than Wolverine Origins. You'll almost give them a pass for the half-ass season 5 where they moved production to the Philippines.
Is waltz right into Magnus's fortress.
Yeesh, don't get any ideas, singer. Prepare for a series that's about so much more than fighting supervillains. It's also about fighting prejudice.
No more mutants! No more mutants.
As racists and bigots of all stripes are defeated by a stereotypical Southerner,
The land is out cold for a leftover husband.
stereotypical Cajun,
There's always more gators in the line.
stereotypical Russian,
Dos vidania.
and stereotypical German.
Of course, Fräulein.
Because nothing defeats stereotypes like a different, more powerful stereotype. So gear up for this 90s cartoon that's great despite being very much a product of its time.
Surrender, mutant.
Of course. Not.
That might be the second best superhero series ever made. And when first place is Batman, second place ain't half bad. Starring Sentinels sucking at their jobs, storm yelling at nature.
I summon the Arctic winds! Rain, wind, lightning, rain, lightning, thunder!
Awesome Easter eggs.
His name is Cable.
Assassin!
It's Miss Marvel!
Wolverine trying to curse.
All right, you egg-sucking piece of gutter trash. I don't want to play. Yeah, piece of that alien gutter trash.
Cliffhangers. Wolverine grunting. Scott and Jean yelling each other's names.
Scott! 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 Scott!
Jean Grey's ex-gasms. Is it weird that this is kind of turning me on? X-Men. Movies.
So guys, our purpose today is just to answer your questions about the show we love making, and just start right in.
And maybe do a quick walk down memory lane here too, that hard to imagine back then, but for those of us who were there were, at once upon a time, 3 networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, and that's where you got your Saturday morning cartoons, and your cereal and your Pop-Tarts, and that's what you sat in front of. And in 1990, Fox came into existence, and thanks to an amazing woman named Margaret Lesh, Fox Kids was determined to become a powerhouse player in spite of being called Weblet at the time. They weren't even considered a network. And one of her priorities was, after working with Marvel for several years on the executive side of things, wanted to make X-Men into an animated series. Met resistance at every level, but was able to then, when she became president of Fox Kids, or the head of Fox Kids, to say, I want to make this property, and move forward with it from there.
That's, as you started, yeah, it was her project, and Margaret picked 4 people to be in charge creatively of the project. Picked Larry and Will Mineo on the art and production and direction side, on the animation side, and they picked me on the writing side, and there's a 4th person, but Mark Edens, who had a hand in 30 or 40 of the episodes, either as a credited writer or helping lay the 2 first seasons out. So they worked with us all before, and a company actually hired Larry and Will, Graz Entertainment, so that they could get the X-Men job. They knew that Fox would be so interested in having them run the show that they would pick that production company because they had them as employees. So again, with no further ado, we've got writers, producer director, and writing supervisor here. And I just spent 2 years going over this stuff to do a book that's coming out this summer. So we remember everything. Any questions you got? Almost everything.
Exactly.
It's been a while. Now, I was going to add something to it, that when I was working at Marvel Productions, Margaret was the head of our studio with her and Stan Lee. And there were several episodes in Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends where we tried to cameo the X-Men to try and tease it for the executives to try and sell the show. So I think it was Firestorm was born, we threw an X-Men here, and then we eventually got a shot at trying to do an episode called Pride of the X-Men, where we tried to, we got the money to try and do a pilot, and it was like, we tried to do our best, but there was so many politics going on at the time that it turned out very close to what we wanted, but You know, it didn't sell. Well, Margaret was trying to push it, so she was behind the project 100%, but we couldn't get Fox to buy it at the time. So luckily when she left, eventually got to Fox and everything, she was able to greenlit the show and get it on the air.
Yeah, she's been, for 10 years, she's been trying to get the show on, a network to put the show on, and everybody just thought, nobody will watch this.
Right.
So, we're thrilled that she stuck it out and entrusted us to do the work on it, and then again, here we are. So we hope we changed your childhood or whatever, whatever age you were when you saw the shows.
Yeah, the one thing you need to remember is that back in, I guess, 92, most series only lasted 13 episodes. That's it. You didn't have a guarantee of second year, third year, fourth year. And so the first year it came out, we just tried to go out, give it the best show we could do, and go out with a bang, story-wise and visually-wise, and just at least if we only lasted 1 year, we did our best.
What was the first order? How many?
It was 13, and everybody on the creative side was let go.
Yeah.
And 3 months later, they figured, oh damn, this is a #1 hit. What are we going to do? We need to hire everybody back.
Yeah, we had our resumes out.
Yeah, we were working out of the shows when we heard that X-Men started up again. But that's how little faith they had in the show before it started. There was nothing in our contracts that said we had to come back and do the second season. I wish we'd had more leverage, like, okay, double my salary. But it worked out. We got to do 5 seasons. So, all right. Gentlemen in the front row.
So, the two-sided question is that what were you pleasantly surprised that you actually got to do story-wise, and what did you perhaps regret that you might not have been able to get done story-wise?
Well, just to start, I don't know if you guys are animation historians, but we'd all worked in it. Well, Len and Julie and I and Larry, we'd all worked in animation before that. These guys just started on our show. It was their first gig. So credit them with hitting the ground running. But before that, most shows were kind of cartoony. Even superhero shows were very young, very cartoony, and if you wanted to the networks just laid down the law, or the production companies, toy companies, whatever, just said, we're pitching this for your average 6 or 7 year old. Don't make the stories very involved. Don't make the characters very sophisticated. You can't have people in love or hitting each other or doing all those adult things. Make them young and simplified. And luckily, Margaret and Sidney Iwater, who was her #1 executive, who was hands-on, he was hands-on on our show, on Spider-Man, on The Tick, on Batman. He had creatively supervised half a dozen of the best shows ever put on television, animated shows. I mean, at the same time, I don't know how he did it, but they both wanted to differentiate this new place, Fox network, from the other networks. And they said, okay, we're going to be more ambitious. We'll make edgier, older, more sophisticated, more demanding shows. So we, the writers and artists, had been pushing for that for 20 years and just not been allowed to do it. And so it was like a kid in a candy store, like, oh, really? Okay, well, you asked for it. And so on the upside, we got to tell wonderfully complex stories. The only downside for us, we weren't really reined in as far as the storytelling was. It was a modest budget. It was a very short schedule. We started as when I booked Batman, it was about 19 months from when they started until the first show aired. With us, it was 7. So we had to write this stuff very fast and produce it very quickly and hope for the best. It didn't have a year to polish it up. So the regrets tended to be on the, if we had an extra couple weeks to think this through or to polish this, we could have improved it. But I don't think there were regrets on the storytelling side. I think we got to do what we wanted.
If you think back to shows that were done, superhero shows that were done like Super Friends and that sort of thing, they were the characters we all know and love, but they were done with a very light touch. When Batman the Animated Series and the X-Men Animated Series began, it was the first time they were doing deeper, darker stuff, dealing with sort of like something that was much more in the dramatic mode. you know, they had moments of humor, we all, you know, try to do that as often as possible, but you would always say, okay, you can't do that. I mean, I think there was I don't know if it was some version of Filmation's Batman, but he couldn't punch anyone.
Right.
Which, you know, we all know, okay, kids show, but on the other hand, that's what these characters are designed to do, it's physical contact. So when you have those kind of restrictions, you have to find your way around it. With this, we could say, okay, well, we can be a little more sort of true to the material.
Yeah. So Larry, you talk from a fan of the books as far as being true to them.
How's that? There we go.
Yeah, what you were saying about the level of, they call it violence, I call it action. I mean, back at Filmation, I mean, I worked on the Lone Ranger, I couldn't use a gun. You know? And, or if you did use it, you had to...
Throw the silver bullet.
And then the other guy had to have a catcher's mitt?
Yeah, I mean, we had to do things, we couldn't do physical contact. So those things like you had to shoot a chandelier, then you show the chandelier fall, you hear off-screen crash, you see it, you know, caught the bad guy. Or the bad guys would run at Tonto go like this, they go past camera, you hear all the camera shake cut and the guys, but there was no physical contact anymore. And so that was the restrictions we were dealing with since the early 80s.
So action was indirect. Batman would throw a batarang at a chandelier,
Yeah.
or something like that. Somebody would be on a box and they'd tip over the box, and you just couldn't actually do the stuff we all remember reading in the comic books from 1938 onward.
Yeah, and worse than the action restrictions, I was feeling from the writing side, because the action is going to grow or diminish as much as they let us, but not letting us tell adult, real human stories about loss and grief. And we fought for about a month to be able to let Morph die in the opening, in the pilot episode, and that was a big deal. Other networks wouldn't have allowed such a thing. I mean, you couldn't show blood, you couldn't scratch somebody, you could injure somebody, much less kill somebody. So we felt that it was important, if there's going to be an action show, that consequences were shown. That it wasn't they weren't playing at it, it's not a game. There was a lot at stake in this X-Men universe, and we wanted it to be a real human adult universe. And they went for that, and they adjusted, and we got to do a lot of things that weren't done before our show.
This was also a very sort of sketchy political climate at the time. When you think of what was happening in the early 90s with Peggy Charon and those parents groups that were very focused on the language and violence issues in children's programming. And especially at the Fox network, which was this breakout network that had a lot of controversial shows like Married with Children and Primetime, so they were extra gun-shy about certain language and certain types of action that we couldn't show. I remember on one of our episodes, we got a note from Broadcast Standards that asked us not to refer to a killer satellite as a killer satellite. Just the word killer was too much for them, even though it's a common use for a thing that exists in space.
And we forget what television, since television is broadcast into our homes and we have no control over keeping it out, it's always been regulated. And before our time, on I Love Lucy, you couldn't say the word pregnant. You couldn't show Lucy and Ricky sitting on the same bed, fully clothed, and talking to each other, because that was too sexual. So that was, and with kids, it's even more restrictive, because you've got psychology, you've got parents and parents groups and psychologists saying, oh, you don't want to challenge them, you don't want to confuse them, you want to keep things black and white, you want to, don't scare anybody. So parents groups or parents would have leverage over broadcast networks with writing campaigns. You can actually take a license away from a TV network for, if you got enough people angry at what you showed. Well, if you showed hardcore pornography or something on, you'd get taken off the air now. But the standards were much, 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 much more restrictive at the time. And we felt that as a creative staff, if you're going to pick a superhero show where these people are struggling for human rights, in effect, you have to show that it's dangerous and you can't play at it. And that was we had that mandate from the beginning, and they let us do it to their credit.
Was it rougher for you than for Batman, with which they actually got to use guns that shot bullets and not energy blasts?
Talk to somebody who did a bunch of Batman
I
storyboards.
remember that quite well, because it was like, Batman could almost do anything. X-Men, we had so many restrictions, and I remember, though, I think it was the first or second episode, where there was a guy dressed in a mutant outfit trying to upset a Senate hearing or something. And the script had him just, do all this thrashing and stuff and jump out of a window. And I got a note from standards saying, no, you can't jump out of a window. You gotta throw a chair through the window. Then he jumps through, which is like added animation. It slows down the drama. Okay, fine, I do that. And, I'm watching the episode, then the next episode is Batman, watching Batman. There's Batman, jumps through a window. I'm like, wait a minute. And then Batman has all of these machine guns and bullets and stuff, and they ricochet and stuff. And I'm going, we have to have, like, I think it was a Nightcrawler episode, we had these villagers coming after Nightcrawler, they all have laser guns.
That's one dozen of Bavarian village, by the way, that's standard. They have an REI there, and that's what you buy.
Right. When we talk to networks, you said, well, they have dark deco. They don't have real Tommy guns. They're called dark deco. Somehow that was their excuse as to why they could have machine guns. We had to have lasers.
Because it was quasi-period piece.
Yeah, and that's what.
Who knows?
Listen, everybody, nobody's trying to make your life hard on the executive side. They're not in the business of just being spoilers. They have their mandate. They have the people they need to answer to. So you can't say, oh, how dare they? Because, they have things they need to do to keep their jobs. And our job is to respectfully, when necessary, push back. We're not trying to be arbitrarily violent. We're not being cavalier about any of this because we know that this has a kind of a visceral response. So we want to make sure that what we do is done with, with thought and understanding that sometimes, okay, there should be some pushback. That way, sometimes restrictions are helpful in the writing process. We're getting kind of deep into the woods here, but does anybody have an episode or a character that they want to hear about? Because we're happy to yatter on for days.
Gentlemen in the back.
Where'd you get all beasts and quotes?
Bartlett's.
Guilty. And we all had quote books, but that wasn't the big thing. That was the thing with books, really. He just was articulate. He just was the most articulate guy in the book. So I just thought, in the other shows we all were doing in animation, characters would have calls to action, which is whatever. It's morphin' time.
Avengers assemble.
Avengers assemble.
Where did I leave my pants?
Go gadget. Whatever. So, and I always thought that was kind of simple-minded and that was done more for the toy sales, so that every 6-year-old that's going in to buy some toys, it's going through their head. I need Avengers assemble. So well, instead, Beast wouldn't just mumble something rote, he would have a quote. And so we started with the first episode, with the pilot, and I just dug through, I looked up under feet, his feet are above something. And we found some obscure British poet that had a stanza about averting your feet and persevering. Okay, so Beast averting his feet and persevering. And everybody enjoyed it. And so it's like Larry put in hundreds of Easter eggs of people. Every time I got, or the writers would get, because that was a deal that we were trying to do, we would put in a Beast quote from someone, rather than just say prose, he'd quote. And the actor loved it, and we enjoyed it. We look forward to it, just to make ourselves happy.
And again, back in 1992, it was Bartlett's.
It was a dusty book. There was no web. There was no web.
So that took a little more human effort to, what would be appropriate here? Oh, okay, and then to dig it out. And so, yeah, it was the kind of thing that you're all kind of not necessarily one-upping, but if there was a chance to put Beast in and have him quote something, it was fun to see if you could get the right thing for the right moment.
And God forbid kids should go, well, I wonder who this Tennyson guy is. Who said that? Educational programming.
We have bumped in, or have been bumped into at a con or two where young person, young adult person, I studied philosophy because I heard Beast with these things and I didn't know what he was talking about. And it's like, well, you know what? Yay. There are worse things to get interested in life.
Wow.
All television is educational television when you're a kid. So, I mean, why not tell them good stuff? Tell them the right things, you know?
Yeah, and in the case of Beast standing up in the trial when he's being accused and quoting The Merchant of Venice, quoting Shakespeare, the core focus of the show was on human rights, and there's no more famous quote than in The Merchant of Venice, you know, "We forget that we not bleed." Beast would know that, and Beast had an opportunity to say that instead of just saying, "Mutants have rights too." You know, let him be, you know, touch the hearts of the jurors. So that was just every chance we got to put in fun stuff. I mean, that's the best thing. There are an awful lot of limits you have when you're writing for television. When you're writing for yourself, limits are off. But when you're writing for somebody else is paying you, it's their show. They have things they like and they don't like. You have to work within their parameters. But within those parameters, you just try to make it as personal as you can. So it doesn't matter if it's an adaptation, it doesn't matter if there have been 30 years of books before, or we're doing the 900th version of Sherlock Holmes. If we get an assignment, we want to make that story as personal as possible, and this is one way of doing it.
Are there any writers in the room, in the audience here? Okay, so we all write because we think we have something to say about the human condition, about our own perspective in the world, and so even if you're doing something about Fluffy the Funny Furball, you want Fluffy to say something that speaks from your heart. And it could be, sometimes you do shows that are light and silly, and sometimes when there's good material like this, you get a chance to do something that, you know, means something for our hearts and our heads. That's why we do this. And occasionally they pay us.
Occasionally.
Yeah. So, anybody else?
How do you balance between the writing staff and the production team, the very complex action sequences that you had? I mean, some of the episodes that you had were like, 8-on-8 action teams. I mean, stuff that's not been replicated in superhero adaptations, live action, or, well, maybe one or two exceptions.
Yes, well, that's us. That's us, and it's Larry. It's both. But
Yeah.
if you want to go first, we both have a take on, because it means a lot to us. I think in some of the movies, for example, which have wonderful things in them, we think some of the action scenes haven't been laid out as well. If you've got six people against 6 people, you can't just have 5 of them standing around while a couple people fight, and then oh yeah, they're still there, aren't they? We've got to service everybody. We were very careful to only bring as many people to an altercation, to a choreographed action, as we could choreograph. Because I just always was thinking, the audience is going to be wondering, what is the Hulk doing over in the corner not participating?
Right.
You got to keep everybody active. And Larry did the same thing with the boards.
Yeah, one of the things that as the director of the series, what I would do is, I didn't storyboard all the shows, but I supervised all the action direction that came across my desk. And sometimes when you have these group fight scenes, one technique I used to sometimes reboard with the artists had done. And one thing I used to do was like the old Western films, where you have all the Western guys in a bar fight. Well, if you sit down and watch some of those shots, they lock the camera down, and the fights are going in and out of the frame, you know. So you know everybody's active and stuff is going on. So if you watch some of the scenes, you'll see I lock the camera down, and you get characters fighting each other. They come out, the new ones come in, foreground, background, and keeping the activity so you can hear sound effects off screen. You can see them occasionally, so you know stuff's happening even if you can't see everybody. So that's one technique I did, just lock the camera down and just let the mayhem ensue.
You had on one episode of the Phoenix Saga, 3 planes of action going, where you had a foreground fight, a mid-ground fight, and then in the back, Juggernaut had been like thrown into a wall, and then he comes in and rejoins the fight.
That's one of the sequences I redrew, and to try and keep everything going and keep it active and stuff.
I'm sure from time to time the writers would send in stuff that made you crazy. The first episode that I wrote for the show was called Comfort, and that was two giant superhero teams battling in an enclosed space. And I'm sure when you guys received it, it was like, we can't handle 16 people doing things. Stop. But you managed. I mean, look, I thought that was a really well-made episode, but I'm sure it wasn't easy.
It was a challenge. I'll put it that way. But it had nothing to do with the script. I was like, I was trying to keep all the characters active and keep the action going, so you wouldn't be thinking about what happened to these guys. Are they fighting? Are they just waiting for their turn for the camera to turn toward them? Stuff like that. So, no, the best thing about it, is having excellent scripts to work from. These guys, these great scripts to work from, and it's like, it's like great. All I got to do now is add more stuff and make it visually as exciting as possible.
Yeah, so I think it was a nice balance in that the writers cared, or if they didn't care how our scripts were longer, much longer than most. The average animation script is usually maybe 32 pages, something like that. Ours were usually 40. And part of that was we just told them, look, the board guys are going to do something special with this because they're good at, but we all have short of time. Lay out as much detail as you can as a writer, choreograph as much as you can on the script, and make it longer and longer and longer, which drives them crazy. But give those as best as you can. So they're just not starting from, we'd see scripts handed in from people that didn't know action shows, like, oh, and then the two groups fight each other for a while. And you said, what's the board artist going to do with that? No, that needs to be 2 pages of detail about where everybody is, who is fighting with whom, and how each one's progressing, and how it builds. It's like music; it goes through a resolution and it ends. And you can't just say, "Oh well, the artist will figure it out."
Well, you can, but they'll kill you.
Yeah, they'll kill you. And you don't want them angry because you want the show to be good. And so we were trying hard. They were super improving whatever we gave them, and that's why, for whatever weaknesses the show has, I don't think there's a lot of weak fight choreography. I think we all were on a good page on that.
Team shows are kind of a blessing and a curse. I mean, it's great to have a great team show, whether it's X-Men or something like Transformers or something, where you have a group of heroic characters. You can get all that great interaction. The curse is, how do you manage them in an action scene? And one technique we often use is to split off 1 or 2 of those characters and have that episode be about just that pairing or that character doing a solo mission. Or maybe we split the team in half and give half the team one mission and the other half has another mission to keep the action more manageable. And it also allows you to cross-cut and elapse time. There's but the fun though is seeing those big sequences where they all go at it, because that's like when it all comes together. But the trick is finding, keeping those episodes special and different.
Yeah, one of the things that I brought to the X-Men show was that I had been working in animation for almost 12 years and in different departments to lay out to storyboards and doing sheets and stuff. And over the years of working in the business, I got to know every department's complaints, what they liked, what they didn't like. So, and also a lot of us would study at the time a lot of Japanese animation where they could create a lot of fantastic visuals with very little effort, with the illusion of using 2D artwork to create 3D artwork. And in working on when I got the X-Men, the one thing I tried to do was, in order to keep all the original script intact, there are things I did to cut down on unnecessary actions. Like I tried to minimize or eliminate characters walking in and out of scene, because that's a lot of work for an animator. And it's just kind of waste of time, because you're saying, let's go, okay? You don't need to see 8 characters walk across the screen. Just cut to a headshot and you go, let go, and either you wipe or take them out, and you cut to the next shot. And then you have like, spread the dialogue over some action so that you can keep as much of the dialogue in, because we had to ship a show overseas at a certain length. And so anything that went beyond the length got chopped out. So I wanted to make sure the script stayed intact as much as possible. So I tried to do that to minimize excess and stuff. And like there's a character in production that he's really complicated. I think he's called Mr. Sinister. And he's got this rooster tail cape. He's got all these lines across him like this. And it's like, if you're gonna have him go like this, the animator's gonna kill you. Because they gotta animate all these damn lines and stuff. So if you watch Mr. Sinister, I never turned him. As little as possible. You see him in a shot, you cut to someone talking, when you cut back, if it needed him turned, he'd just be in a new position. But he didn't move because he had all that stuff. I mean, there was a shot where Cyclops hits him in the chest, and okay, you gotta animate that shot. But in most cases, I kept him still, just because I knew it would be a bitch to turn him and stuff. But there are little things like that that I would do to try and help the animators overseas so they can get through it. So that I didn't kill them on this shot because I want them to put their efforts into this shot over here, which is the money shot, and not the static shot. You know? So that over the years, I was a director on the G.I. Joe series, in the G.I. Joe movie, and Spider-Man is his friend. It's like all of that accumulation of what to do and not to do, I was able to apply it to the X-Men and just make it an efficient running machine to get approvals, get the backgrounds, color, just try and get stuff done.
Building on that idea, I have heard in the past, you're still working in the 90s, so you don't have quite as much CG as you do, now.
Eddie.
Try to be generous. I heard it said that one advantage that a lot of our writers had trouble with taking advantage of in animation is the fact that because you had animation, you could make bigger worlds, so to speak, than you could, with standard, live action sort of a thing. So for the writers and for the rest of you, for that matter, did you feel like you were able to stretch those muscles or take advantage of those advantages? You talked about fighting, but bigger beasts on sets, sorry for the fancy word.
I was going to say, absolutely. I mean, we could be, novelists. If you're writing words, you can make it as big as you want. But at the time, in late 80s, early 90s, if you're doing TV or movies, live action, you were really, really limited because it was so primitive. Talk about CGI. We cut the first episode of X-Men on a film moviola. This is before digital editing. This is cut the film, move it over. So that shows about the time and again, pre-web, pre-video editing. It was an early time. But you're right. One of the fun things about stumbling in animation, I don't know about these guys if they all planned it. I didn't plan it, but versus say writing for primetime sitcoms or even primetime dramas on television, they have a really limited world that they can show. And now that it's getting bigger because of CGI, but at the time, in the 90s, there was no CGI on television. It just was what you could film on a set or a location. So animation, it opens up galaxies worth of space to do stuff. And so that was a big advantage. We got to be huge filmmakers rather than constricted filmmakers in the writing.
But to be fair also, I mean, our shows have budgets, and all that stuff has to be designed, so you're paying an artist, a character designer to design all those new elements and paint those backgrounds and stuff. And CGI animation is even more limiting because building CGI assets is very expensive, and so that's why we tend to try to limit things, in CGI shows. But I think there's, to an extent, you're open to a broader world, but we still have budgets that we need to be aware of.
Oh yeah. And I was thinking more about CGI and live action shows where now they can take live action shows anywhere where they certainly couldn't. But he's right. There was a whole adjustment we had to make for CGI because it's so expensive to build the first set. They want you to use it over and over and over and over again to amortize the cost. But still, the fun advantage of animation is it's just as it costs the same amount to blow up a planet as it does to blow up a beer can. And it's just a matter of drawing one rather than the other.
This is a really big beer can.
But when I worked on the Clone Wars animated series, I wrote one of the early episodes where we had a very limited library of characters. So I wrote the first Yoda episode. So we had Yoda, we had clone troopers, and we had droids. And it was like, well, can I get a tank? Okay, we can get a tank. But we also had, limited locations and limited character counts. And so that's the total number of animatable objects on the screen per episode. There's a limit to that. And clearly by the end of the run of the Clone Wars, that limit had been expanded many, many times over. It was like hundreds of characters on screen at any one time. But in the beginning, it was had like 5 different elements to work with and try to tell that story.
We were speaking earlier about how Batman kind of got to do a little more Batman type stuff, but just going back to that in the world of the X-Men, the animated series, I'm going to say God bless the Sentinels, because you could blow them up, you could rip them up with claws, you could do all kinds of damage to them, and that in its own way was a kind of genius, because we took writing these shows seriously. We weren't trying to be sensational or anything like that, but showing the consequences of things in that world. The Sentinels were very, very helpful for letting our characters tear them apart.
That was one character Wolverine cut loose on. Stab, cut, everything.
I remember an episode where there were some cyborgs too. We could dismember them. So
yes.
Robots and cyborgs were freaking awesome because you could just slice them to pieces. But recently, apparently, society has changed. I've gotten some notes about being nice to robots. So.
Sentient robots?
Sometimes sentient robots, yeah. But even yeah. I guess our robots are too nice now. But yeah.
Robots have feelings too.
Yeah. But even cyborgs, even though they have nerve endings in their arms, I've got notes about.
Yeah.
She just mentioned, in reference to this about the death.
Right, and then they're coming back.
Oh, yeah. So people asked about Morph, and the intention was, from the beginning, we brought him in the show simply to kill him off. Absolutely, he wasn't going to be part of the core team. We wanted to show that being an X-Men, you got these super powerful beings. You don't want them playing at what they're doing. You want deadly consequences to what they're fighting for is important, so important that someone might lose their life for it. So we wanted to show that in the first story. So we put in Morph to die. And of course the actor looks at, thinking he's got 13 episodes of work, and looks at, what do you mean I died in the first story? And so he was upset. But then, some of you have heard the story already here, that after we were done with the show, and it's been months, and we're waiting to get the animation back, and the show started coming back, and they're been produced, and they go on the air, and we have a hit. The network did a little research and asked kids, say 6 to 11, who's your favorite character? And unfortunately for us, it was Morph.
Yeah.
So we got all this trouble to kill Morph off, and we get the phone call. For the second season we're doing, I know we promised, but could you please bring him back and have the death not really happen? And so we were not happy, but...
But you killed him in good faith.
We killed him. Yes, we meant to. And so I think that's why it was convincing. And one of the nice things, that the broadcast standards lady actually did something helpful. She said, well, look, this can't be gratuitous, we can't see him die on screen. And so when you have the episode, we have built up to, and then the Sentinels attack him, and you don't see it, you cut back to some other people in various places, and they start reacting like, wait a minute, it's like, I don't sense Morph anymore. And it took about 3 or 4 different shots of people frowning and wondering, and where is he? Is he here? To realize, oh my God, he's no longer alive. That's why I can't sense him anymore. And the grief built very nicely and the realization built very nicely, and it all happened, was it possible because Morph was off screen when it happened. If he'd been on screen, it just would have been, okay, he was killed and ended this. But it let everybody else in the X-Men react to it before it hit the audience when it happened. And she didn't mean to make it a much more effective dramatic scene, but it became that because of the limitations you put on us.
Right.
Why'd you create a new character for that?
Because well, it wasn't a new character. Okay, he knows. He tricked me.
Yeah.
He tricked me, and this goes back to
Leading the witness, Your Honor?
this goes back to lawyers. We went through, as we do with so much stuff, we told Marvel, okay, we want to pick someone from the X-Men universe to sacrifice himself and have the X-Men grieve over. Who would be appropriate? We looked, we found this guy named Changeling, who had sacrificed himself for Xavier. And he'd only been in 3 or 4 books, so he's a tiny character. We picked him specifically. He's from the Marvel universe. We wrote him in the pilot. We storyboarded him named Changeling. And then we got a call from lawyers. DC has a character named Changeling. Change him. You got to use another character. And I looked, and Marvel's was 3 years predated DC's. Doesn't matter. You're risking a lawsuit. And so basically we kept exactly the same character from the books that was Changeling. We just changed his name to Morph. And that was it. It was just the name. Okay. And the lawyers are happy. But he is a character from the Marvel universe. He's a renamed character from the Marvel universe.
Right.
Were you aware of, or had you considered, there's another character from the early X-Men era called Mimic, who also had powers like that? Maybe it's too obscure?
You know what? To be honest, when we picked him, it was simply we were trying to connect to stuff that people had done in the books. So we picked him specifically not because he was a shapeshifter, but because he had sacrificed his life for Professor Xavier. And that was the only connection for us. It happened he was a shapeshifter, which made it very fun. But that was just gravy. That was happenstance. The fact that he died in the books was why we chose him. 10 minutes, okay. Yeah.
Did you ever have any characters that you wanted to kill off, but the producer or just someone wouldn't let you?
I don't.
Oh, that's right. We got
Transitional
question. We weren't really looking to kill off that many more people, although there is. Who is it? I think it's at the end of one of Lands where it looks like somebody's walking into a house to be killed off at the very end of the episode. And he doesn't remember that, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
But no, there was we actually wanted somebody to,
Oh, I do, and
Yeah.
to your point, yes, well, and you never saw that character again, did you?
you never saw this character again. At the end of one of his episodes, a character is walking in to certain death, and you go to black and it's over. So we killed one other person. But there was a
Not that this is a hobby for us.
That's 76 episodes.
Yeah.
But we actually wanted to create, we wanted a new person to be born that we weren't allowed to create. Because at the end of the first season, Larry will remember this, Scott proposes marriage to Jean, and a couple writers and I that were laying out the second season after that wanted to say, look, they're married, because we're going to have the wedding at the beginning of the next season, and we want to show Jean 7 months pregnant and give birth to a double mutant baby from Scott and Jean. And I thought, oh, this will be cool. And we, in our innocence as writers, and Larry and the Marvel, Bob, the 2 guys from Marvel, and Will Minio, our supervising producer, all these people called me up frantically and said, do you understand do you not remember what it's like to be a boy watching, you want her 7 months pregnant in spandex running around fighting apocalypse while we're waiting for the baby to be born during this story arc. I said, think again, please. So we pulled back because people wiser than us thought, well, we just had a bunch of kids among our it's like maybe we were kid happy at the time. But he said, no, a very pregnant Jean for 10 episodes is not what we need to see. So we had the marriage be a sham, and so they didn't have a baby, but then they get married at the very end of the series. So we held off and did it again. Way late. We don't show the baby. We don't have a baby, but we have the marriage at the end.
Now for me, there's one scene I was able to slip into one of the episodes of, I think it was the end of Time Fugitives #1, where Apocalypse grows out of the house and he's really pissed off.
Yeah.
And you see him blast, and he actually kills the X-Men. If you see them, they all disappear in a blast, and they're dead. So by the time Time Features 2 roll around,
Yeah.
it's a different timeline. And so he doesn't do that. He flies up on a bubble and goes off somewhere.
And chooses not to do it, so that they were dead for a moment.
They were dead for a moment, but I couldn't linger on it. I wanted to get it through the system, you know? But they did all die.
You know, I got a question about that one, and I didn't know how to answer that, but now I do. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry.
So I just looked in one where they all got
Was
killed.
that episode chosen to save money?
With what?
Because you did time travel, so you repeated some of the footage over. Other cartoons have done something similar to that, maybe not time travel, but they go back to the same location to save money. I'm just always curious if that was purely a creative decision or possibly a production decision.
It was basically, had two writers write, you know, here's the fight, and then the fight occurs in another, you know, again, which I was basically, I Xeroxed the same storyboards, but suddenly you had a new character. Rogue wasn't in the first one, and she kind of, and Cable, and suddenly it was like, it was the same, but it was different. So I had to re-storyboard. If you look at that, it's almost like a minute where there's no dialogue. I had to redraw everything from the first episode to the second.
Yeah, actually, in a number of series we've been involved in, we've all been working this a long time, and probably maybe average 30 or 40 different shows each that we've been involved in. We've all had those instances where, oh, this needs to be a cheaper episode. Let's restage this stuff in these locations we've already used, or maybe with luck, some old footage to save a little cash. And they do that everywhere. They call bottle episodes. They did that on Star Trek, where you'd have all this big action, and then there'd be an episode that all took place in the shuttlecraft. And because that one needed to be half as expensive because they've been overspending for 6 weeks. I don't remember having that. I think we had like 4 or 5 different time travel series. And when we reuse stuff, it was always for, okay, we show it once and now we'll show it from a different perspective, or we're re-showing this to remind the audience of something. So it wasn't like, oh, this is going to save us 30 seconds of production animation. I certainly was never asked to write something like that to save money. On most shows that including X-Men, we were given a voice limit. Each time you had an actor, even just saying, get out of here, it costs $1,000, whatever it costs to record an actor. So we would have quantitative limits, and that's why sometimes secondary characters don't say anything, or you have a sparsely populated one episode where you only have 2 or 3 X-Men and 3 or 4 guests, and the next one is full of people. So there is that balance. But as far as the time, I don't think we ever consciously reuse scenes to save money.
No, and there was a show called where Wolverine was Alpha Flight, something with Alpha Flight and Wolverine up in Canada or something like that. And there was a limit on how many voices, because in an episode Snowbird wasn't there. She wasn't in the episode at all. And so I wrote her into the show. I drew her in the show, made her part of the action, and made her part of the story, but I couldn't add dialogue because it was already recorded.
It's already recorded.
So when you see Snowbird, it's all because I added her to the show.
Yeah.
So we all know like the opening of the series is like iconic, but there's like a Japanese opening floating out there.
Which is very cool.
Shit on that?
Yeah. Well, they did, obviously they did it separately later, and it's a different company. 2 things. One is Larry and Will did the entire opening themselves. Larry did a first pass at it. Will did an adjustment, and I've got the 2 storyboards from that. And this entire incredibly cool, it's one of the best things in the show. And it was just those 2 guys, they thought, okay, what would I like to see to start an episode? The rest of us had no influence. It was just those 2 guys sitting down making something fun. 75 seconds. I timed it because I was going through it for the book to see how it progressed. And A, he did that, and B, to show you how primitive it was. Larry had to draw all the names you keep seeing flying up in the openings. We asked Marvel, do you have these that you can send us that we can put in? No, you can't. You can't use anything we've got. You've got to paint your new ones.
Right.
So
I had to draw it.
You had to draw all those names and animate all those. But yeah, that was just the 2 of them saying, we've done a bunch of shows. What would we like to see the opening be? And you guys have seen other shows. It can make or break. So Okay, we're down to a minute or so.
Yeah.
Oh, no, one thing that Eric's brought along, and if you're interested, we got them here, folks.
Just for fun.
Just for fun. Photocopies, but from our personal files. What we have here is the cover sheet of the very first draft, of the very first episode of the very first
This is
X-Men.
Script 1, Night of the Sentinels, and a main note to my writer Mark Edens. Gruffer Wolverine, please.
So you can see we got
I just made a copy off of the old script in the file, and so you're welcome to just take a page if you want, just for fun.
rusted paper clip and all. So thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you being here.